Evening, Brian. Good to see you. Right, we're just about ready to go online. We're on. Lovely. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Audit. I don't know whether it's too late to wish you a happy new year, although what new year we're going to have is anybody's guess. Looking at the news nationally makes for interesting reading or listening. Absolutely. I'd like to welcome Helen Parks. Welcome, Helen. We've got Chris Brown joining us online. Ilias is there as well. And we've got Alexander Campbell from the internal auditors joining us in place of Sarah Knowles. Sarah sent me a message earlier on saying that she couldn't make it and that Alex would be looking after that side of things for us. Just before I go into everything, just so that everybody's ready, and this is a management consultant test tonight, folks. We've altered the agenda quite significantly. The late items, if you can have those on one side, please, because we're going to look at item 1A and the 1B, and we're going to take the draft internal audit annual report together along with item 8, which is the external audit draft audit completion report. Because they're all linked, we thought it's common sense to bunch them together and go through them in that way. So if you can take that on board, please, ready for when we start on that. Okay, so we'll start off with apologies and substitutions.
No apologies.
Okay.
Just a note to say that Councillor Hollick's stuck in traffic.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a proposer and seconder, assuming, of course, that everybody's happy with them?
Happy to propose.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Additional urgent business by reason of special circumstances. I don't have any, or I've not been advised of any.
No, non-chair.
Lovely. Thanks, Rebecca. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations that they want to make? No. Thank you. Questions? I haven't had any questions. I'm not aware that we've got any.
No questions,
okay.
Chair.
Okay, so if we can start, please, with the agenda item 1A. And I presume that Ashley's going to take us through that. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. So that's the first thing to cover is probably the external audit report, the covering report for the external audit report, which I think is item 8 on the agenda. The reason for that is you need to be informed of the external auditor's findings before you consider the financial statements, because you need to sort of have an understanding of their findings before we go on to adopt the accounts. There's also an internal audit report that helps to back up the annual governance statement, which is their annual audit report. And it might just be nice to check that before you approve the annual governance statement, because their opinion is mentioned in the annual governance statement. At the time I drafted the annual governance statements, it was a draft opinion. They've now sent that on your annual governance, their annual report, which gives their overall opinion. So that's what we're trying to do with the agenda at the moment, is kick off with the covering report for the external auditors, so you get to find their findings before you adopt the accounts. Hopefully the logic of that makes sense, because the audit members need to be informed of the findings of the external auditor before you adopt the accounts. So if the chair is happy for me to do that, I would like to start with the covering report for the external auditors, and then Helen can run you through the detail of that, and then we'll just go back to the financial statements and the internal audit report. Are you comfortable with that, Chair?
I'm happy with that. Actually,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Okay, so if you look at agenda item 8, I've done a covering report just to bring out some of what management feel are some of the key elements to bring to your attention. Obviously, the external audit report covers the opinion and the value for money. And part of this is just to bring out part of the hard work that has gone into particularly the value for money side of things. If you remember this time last year, we had a significant risk. Part of the work that the audit committee had done in its self-assessment had identified that as well, because there was something about the governance and risk arrangements which needed to take action. The peer review had picked that up, and obviously external audit had come in and had seen that this needs to be done. Since then, the audit committee has done a self-assessment, action has been taken. We now have the risk register come in. We're moving forward on the fraud work that needs to be done. And that has actually ended up with, we've gone back to a normal value for money. There are no significant weaknesses. And from where we were just a year ago, that was quite a chunk of work for us to do to bring the audit committee forward. So I think to some extent, you can pat yourselves on the back in terms of that, because a lot of work has gone on into that from members and from the officers that help to support the committee. So that was one of the key things that obviously I wanted to bring to your attention. I'm sure that Helen will bring that out as well, but I wanted to push it a bit. The rest of it was just to bring a bit of context. It's been a hard few years with the disclaimed opinions that we have had. And that has led to a backlog, and we've discussed that backlog and the disclaimed opinions and the need to move forward. And this year, obviously, AZETs are planning as part of a staged work to build back that backlog work. And as part of that, because of the resources, it was agreed in part of their plan and agreed with the audit committee that in the year in question, they wouldn't test the I&E side of things, and they were trying to build back work on the balance sheet. So that meant we were always going to get a disclaimed opinion this year. So that also puts the opinion that's been issued this year into context. And there's a lot of work to do, because for the 3 years before that, our previous external auditors didn't give us any assurance. And I think a lot of the thing that AZETs have found reflects the fact that there was a lot that would have been brought to our attention over a period of time, and now it's all come together in one go. So part of the things that they've found, obviously, there's some significant risks which I've run through there. That our work has not identified any significant issues in management's override of controls, but obviously not all of the areas that they might have liked to have tested could they test, and so a full conclusion on that couldn't be given. But they're not saying that there is that as part of the disclaim. Presumption of fraud, again, there's an area. If you haven't tested I&E, you can say we don't think there are anything. You can go as far as you can on the balance sheet testing, but if you haven't actually tested the I&E, and it was planned, it is part of the build back, so there's no surprises there. You're never going to be able to come to a full conclusion on that, because you're asking somebody to come to a conclusion without all of the evidence. So there is part of the issue. One of the things that we have had, and we have to hold our hands up with this, it was noted by our auditors that some land that was on the HRA land wasn't on our fixed asset register that we use for finance. We've done a lot of looking into that, and there's a history to it. Property gets sold out of the HRA, you end up with garage plots, there's bits of land that have virtually no value until such time somebody says, oh, I think I might be able to squeeze a small house on there, or if I could go through there, I've got access to a bigger piece of land. And so instead of them being small bits of land that haven't got a really big value, all of a sudden they do have a value. And when they get disposed of, we have another valuation. And there you go. We've got a disposal with a valuation that was picked up by our external auditors. And then when we've looked into it, we need to now find out the history of that. We've got another underlying system in the council that records all of our land that is separate to the financial fixed asset register. So a lot of work has gone into that to find out the history of what's in, what's out. And what we need to do now is rebuild the financial statements going all the way back to 2019-20. That was the last clean opinion. And what we've done, we've got that trail, but what the next piece of that work is to link it into the disposals that were reported in those individual years, and so we can get the whole trail, and we've got an opening balance that we feel comfortable with. We can hand it over to external audit and they can do it. That took us longer than we thought, but it should be something we can hand over for the next piece of audit work as part of the build back and get that right. We also had some problems with the land registry. There were some documents that we wanted from them, and we asked them and asked them and asked them and asked them, and for some reason they just didn't get them to us in time for the backstop. And that means that some of the valuation couldn't be done because the underlying records, we don't hold them, the land registry hold them, and it just happened to be those ones that were picked in a sample and that we couldn't get a hold of them. So that was part of it. Pension, I must admit, I think in here I've typed in the wrong answer to the IFRS 16 part, which is on one of the pages, page 31. But basically, the pension assets, we haven't got assurance from the pension auditor at the moment, and that wouldn't just be us that was affected on their triennial valuations to be able to get the opening balance sorted. We have had a new valuation from the actuary, so that should take care of itself with the new valuation. The IFRS 16 lease work, there was a change in the accounting standard, which meant we had to look through many different types of leases. There were some questions raised on that. Because we were getting close to the backstop and the opinion was about to be disclaimed, we didn't get that information in time, but to some extent, we took the view there's a lot of resource that needs to be thrown at that, and the accounts are going to be disclaimed anyway. And with the land asset value, we've decided to, with talking with our external auditors, that we will put that right for the next audit. But what it does do is mean that there's a big ask coming forward in the next audit round, because we need to make sure we've got the capacity to deal with all of those queries. I wasn't going to particularly draw anything else to your attention in that. The detailed report, it's the external audit report. So I'll hand over to Helen, if that's okay, to go over now the detailed findings. He'll be able to explain more than I have about what's in that report. Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points on the covering report. I'd like to just ask, Ashley, if I may, the table of comments under paragraph 3.1, I just wanted to ask, the comments, are they in effect HSBC's management comments on the audit, as opposed to the auditor's comments? Yeah, it's not clear, you see, that it's not clear from the reports that it could either be a précis of comments the auditors have made, or it could be a commentary that management are making.
The first two columns come straight from the report. The last one is sort of a management mix of taking their comments and phrasing it that basically fits into the table and hopefully has the same meaning, but it's not an exact copy of the external audit. It's through a management view of what those comments mean.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if it was made clear in a next. And finally, oh, I see we've got another 3.6. I'm confused. Value for money. The last sentence of that paragraph I found curiously phrased, in that it's a report coming to audit committee, to have a phrase that says what audit committee are committed to. I'm not challenging the factual statement. It's just it might have been worth saying audit committee on such and such a day took the decision to commit to this or something. It just looks odd in a report that's coming to the committee, if you see what I mean.
It's because we only kicked it off in the meeting the other day. That was the 29th of January. Was the second review, so that bit, the updated action plan, still needs to come to the audit committee.
Yeah. Any further comments on that part? No. Ashley, would you like to carry on then?
I think it's for Helen to do the detailed external audit report now.
Right, over to you then, Helen.
Thank you. So this is the audit completion report, and this is the summary of the work that we've done on your annual accounts for 24-25. I do just want to make it clear regards to value for money. So our findings from that work were presented to you in November in our auditor's annual report, and there is a page in this report that just summarises that, but the detail is in the auditor's annual report if you wanted to revisit that. This is quite a long report, so I am just going to pull out kind of key messages from it, and then obviously I'm happy to take any questions on the detail. I've got the public plaque off the website, so apologies if the page numbers aren't quite right, but the first page I just want to draw your attention to is page 42 of the public pack, which is our quality indicators. You'll see that most of them are green. There's one that's not applicable, and that's to do with the findings and magnitude of errors in the audit. And the reason for that is, as Ashley's already said, we haven't been able to complete a full audit, so we can't really do any conclusions in terms of what level of error there is within the financial statements. The other one that I want to highlight in here is the amber rated indicator, excuse me, to do with the quality and timing of working papers. But you'll see this reference to a lot more further on in the report, but it's just to highlight to you that we have rated that as amber. So the next page I just want to draw your attention to is page 44 of the pack, and that's our materiality calculations. So I just want to highlight that we did lower it slightly from what we presented to you in our audit plan, and that's just because the council's expenditure wasn't as high as we had originally anticipated, so it made sense to lower that in line with the accounting standards. So Ashley's kind of briefly touched on the issue around HRA land. When we presented our audit plan to you, and I think it would have been June time, we outlined to you the significant risk areas within the accounts. Because of the HRA land issue, and as Ashley said, the team are still working through this, and we don't know what the value of this will be. When we presented to you in November, we thought it was prudent to highlight this as a potential significant risk because it could be material. And obviously, because we don't know the extent of the issue, we wanted to raise that to you. So page 46 in the pack basically gives you a list of all of the significant risks for the council, our level of judgment on those, and then also sort of the outcome of the work. And the outcome of the work against them is covered in a lot more detail on the next, I think it's the next 10 pages. So I'm not proposing to cover these one by one, although I will be happy to take questions on them at the end. So something else that has changed since we submitted our audit plan to you in June is the requirement for us to do a detailed risk assessment of the council's internal control environment and the controls that you've had in place over the years that you've had disclaimed audit opinions. So the guidance that came out on that was called LARIG 6, and there were a number of procedures that we had to do on that. For example, we looked at your outturn reports to identify if there were any issues with budgetary control throughout the disclaimed years. We've reviewed a large number of reports from internal audit, and we've done things like reviewing sort of all of your HRA analytics as well to make sure that we don't have any issues with internal control. We were happy with that outcome from our review, and so as Ashley's mentioned, we decided that we were going to focus on the balance sheet area of the accounts. So page 57 to 59 in the public pack outlines the detailed testing that we have done, and what you'll see is we've clearly stated here that we've not performed any work on income and expenditure balances. We've then outlined the areas of PPE in the balance sheet where we have performed some work, and as I mentioned earlier, we didn't get all of the required evidence back from the council to allow us to conclude on these areas of testing. But I do just want to provide an update on here because at the time I submitted this report, the cash and cash equivalents work was still ongoing. It's now been finished and there's no issues. So I do just want to highlight that that has been done since we submitted this report. I think this would also be a good point to kind of raise just to the committee, and I've discussed this with Ashley, is around the capacity of the finance team. So obviously a lot of our comments in here are saying sort of we didn't manage to finish the work because we didn't receive the evidence and the detail that we needed in time. So in order for you to get a clean opinion by the time of local government reorganisation, we need to do a full audit on the next 3, so 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. We have raised concerns with Ashley around the capacity of the finance team because this year we've only done the balance sheet and we haven't looked at pensions, and there have been some significant delays. And I know that's something that Ashley is looking into and has raised, and Julie's aware as well. But I just wanted to let you know that we've raised concerns about that. So on page 60, we've also outlined the other procedures that we've done, and they're kind of more general procedures around understanding your business processes, a high-level review of the accounts, internal consistency checks. So those are the other areas that we do that are broader than where we're looking at specific balances, but we just wanted to make you aware that we have actually done those. The following few pages, again, are other areas of focus that we have to look at, and just things to make you aware that we've not had any major disagreements with management. We've not identified any sort of significant litigation or claims, and just so we're making you aware of that. The key judgments and estimates, again, as Ashley said earlier, we haven't had sufficient information to be able to look at those in a lot of detail. So again, we can't draw a conclusion on them. Page 67 also outlines, and the few pages after that outline our other responsibilities. And as Ashley's mentioned, we have done some work on relation to fraud. For example, we've tested journals and we've looked at related parties and things like that. We've not identified any issue. I mean, there was a minor issue on related parties, but we've not identified anything that we feel we need to report to you. But unfortunately, excuse me, because we haven't done a full audit, we can't give you a full assurance, so we have had to kind of caveat that within our report. So page 72 of the report just outlines where we have identified issues from our audit, and that's on page 72. And then on 73, we did do some build back work in year, and I'll talk a bit more about, I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But this is just basically outlining the errors that we identified from our build back work of previous years, and the impact that they could have had in 24-25's accounts. There's nothing really to note on here that's significant, but we're required to let you know about those. So page 76, I mentioned earlier on about the risk assessment that we were required to do in line with LARIG 6, and I've included sort of the work that we've done there, but also kind of the conclusion of that the council was low risk, but we will focus on the balance sheet. Page 76 outlines the build back work that we've actually done on the balance sheet. So we've tested additions, disposals, reclassifications and depreciation charge for all of the missing years where it was material and appropriate to do so. And we've identified kind of some minor issues that are included in there. We've also done a consistency check of your reserve movements through the movement in reserve statement to make sure that your accounts are technically working and things are feeding through. Again, there were a few things that we picked up on that, but they've been resolved to our satisfaction. What we will do going forward now is to work with Ashley and the team to understand how we can build back more and kind of what the plan is for going forwards to getting you back to a clean opinion. Page 79, again, is just a summary of the value for money. I'm not proposing to spend much time on that, given we have reported on that in quite some detail already. We have included a detailed recommendation on page 86, which is to do with the HRA land issue and kind of the controls that we think the council should put in place to sort of minimise the impact of this and prevent it from happening in the future. And Ashley has mentioned earlier that the teams are working through that exercise to give us the information. So I do want to draw your attention to pages 89 and 90, which is the fees that we are charging the council. So there are some fees in here that's for our core audit. We have also charged the council for kind of the delays and quality issues with the working papers that we've experienced. Page 90 also then sets out the specific fees in relation to the disclaimer work, our risk assessment and our build back work as well. So you'll see they are higher than kind of the original proposed fees. And then page 91 also includes the fees that we charged as part of our grant certification work, but they're fairly similar in previous years because they're standard fees. So the other item that we've got in the pack tonight is the letter of representation. That's just for your information. Ash is required to sign it when we're ready to sign off the opinion, and it's just to say that he's provided us with everything that we need and he's not aware of any fraud. So that's all I was kind of going to cover, because I appreciate it's a lot in there. I didn't want to bamboozle you with loads of detail, but I'm happy to take any questions that the committee have got.
Thank you, Helen. I won't say I'm stunned, but it's quite a piece of work, isn't it? Members, any comments or any questions for Helen? Paul.
Thank you, Helen. I just got trying to keep it at a high level. Obviously, we knew from last summer that the accounts were going to be qualified. We know the reasons behind that. I just wanted to ask you, in terms of all the thread which you've already mentioned about, well, we've not been able to do this. I was just trying to ask if you can give me any idea of how close you were to what last summer you thought you'd be able to achieve compared to where we are, you know, whether you thought, well, we're 80% of where we hope to be, or you could even be 90, you're 100% where, you know, I'm just trying to get a feeling for how that has gone. And I take the point that you've already made about the resources needed to meet the timescales. The other question I had was just on one word, which is the quality of the accounts and evidence provided was reasonable. And I just asked if you, from an auditor's dictionary, tell me how that reasonable word works out, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
So if I take your first question in terms of sort of progress, so we have been able to complete the build back work that we wanted to complete on PPE movements. So that's a positive, I think. In terms of kind of getting you back to a clean opinion, so just to be clear, this year's accounts aren't qualified, they're disclaimed. So what we would do is, to get to a clean opinion, we have to basically have 3 clean balance sheets. So let's say that next year we do a full audit and there's no problems with the audit, we still can't give you a clean opinion because we don't have assurance over the opening position on things like the pensions. So it would likely be a modified or a qualified except, we do accept 4 opinions. So the earliest you can get an unqualified opinion will be 27-28. So I think in terms of where we are compared to last summer, I think we're roughly where we thought we would be, but there's still a long way to go in terms of getting you back to that. So I don't want to kind of sort of give you false hope here that next year you'll have a clean opinion, everything. And obviously this year we didn't do any I&E testing. Now, because you're low risk, we're hoping that we don't have to go back and do I&E build back work, because that is a lot of work, and some of my councils are high risk, so we're having to do that. But we are also kind of having to deal with new guidance coming out to us as well. So at the moment, I think we're where we thought we would be, albeit we didn't get the work that we wanted to do completed. But I think because we've got 3 years to get to a clean opinion, if we've got the resources on both sides, then that should still be possible. Your second point on reasonable, can you just tell me where you've highlighted that, which page of the report?
It's on page 38. It's just the executive summary, and I'm assuming it's a low-key sort of, well, we've not found any problems, but I just wanted to understand if reasonable had a dictionary definition in audit.
Sorry. So I don't think there's a specific audit definition of reasonable. What we're saying is sort of, it wasn't horrendous and it wasn't outstanding. Sorry, Ashley, it wasn't outstanding. But there wasn't anything that led us to any concerns and didn't prevent us from.
I did ask ChatGPT what that phrase meant in terms of an audit, and it said, well, they're sitting on the fence.
It's basically saying you're kind of middle of the range, yeah.
Thanks for that, Paul. Chris first, then Brian.
Thanks. So just a few. Quality of the working papers. You mentioned about that being an issue, and on page 42, I think it was. Is that an issue across local government, or is that specific for HBBC?
So it varies, to be honest. We have clients that produce amazing working papers. We don't need any follow-up questions to understand things. We have clients that produce working papers and we have no idea how they agree to the accounts. So it's not, I think it varies by client. I couldn't really comment across the whole sector.
Okay, thank you. Can I just go through them all now? All right. There was a percentage of the work you weren't able to complete. I think it's a similar question to Paul's, but subtly different. So if doing the whole audit was 100%, what percentage were you able to do?
So we were able to start, with the exception of IFRS 16, we were able to start all of the work that we wanted to do. And HRA land completeness, but that was a late issue that was found. I'd say we probably got to between sort of 75 and 80% on most of the work, but kind of, you know, a few areas maybe more, maybe less, but on average, that's where I'd put it.
Thank you. Keep going, if I may. On page 72, the IFRS accounting policy, there was no outcome in the table. Is that deliberate?
Apologies, I think when I submitted this, I was still talking to Ilias about it, but I think, as Ashley said earlier, we're hoping to get that sorted out as part of the 25-26 audit.
Thank you. Fees, 282k was the total fee for the audit. How much of that was additional costs because you couldn't do work? A concept which I struggle with a bit, but I'm sure you've allocated people and they couldn't then be used, but I don't understand why there was extra cost. But the key thing for me is how much of that was actually due to that.
So on page 89, there's £10,000, which is sort of relating to the delays we received we had in receiving information. We've actually, the standard fee that we charge a lot of our clients for IFRS 16 is around 10 to 15,000, because we did an initial review and we said we can't do any work on this because we don't think the disclosure is right. That's actually therefore been reduced down to 2,600. The fees that are on page 90 are not because we couldn't do any work, but they're additional fees because of the extra work we've had to do on bill back and disclaimer reporting. But there are funds available, I think, from MHCLG that the council can apply for to help support them in those additional costs from auditors.
Thank you, really helpful. And one last one, which is for Ashley and Julie, I think. What are we doing about the capacity issue? Is that part of this year's budget? I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Thanks. Yeah, certainly when SLT considered the external audit report, we had similar concerns over the capacity within the finance team to be able to deal with these issues in a timely manner. So certainly it is currently under consideration, but Ashley has raised it with a growth request for next year to be able to ensure that the team has the capacity to deal with these matters.
Is that, sorry if I may, Chair, is that for 26-27 or 27-28?
26-27.
That will be, though, working on the 25-26 accounts, although it costs in yesterday.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris, because in actual fact, the capacity was an item I'd got annotated down here. So I'm glad you raised that. Thank you. Brian, you wish to comment?
Well, just you both mentioned value in HRA land, and these bits and bobs may have a value as ransom strip. Well, they haven't got a value until we get that. So what's the problem?
Your fixed asset register from an audit point of view has to be complete. So it's a bit like saying, here's a figure, but if you don't know it's complete and you don't know what the values are, you can't come to a conclusion because you're asking somebody to give an opinion on what they can't see. And so you need to make sure it's complete so that they can make the decision that the bits of land and the bits and bobs haven't got a high value. And so that's it in a nutshell. It's not so much the value, although there may be some valuable items in there. It's more the value that you don't know what's in there because it's not complete, because you haven't got the full list. So that's why it's an audit issue rather than the value. I think when we get there, a lot of the land might not be of value until such a time that somebody identifies it for a particular need, as you've suggested, like a ransom strip. But we need to get that, give it to the auditors before we can answer that question. Thanks.
Yeah, on that land issue, Brian, I mean, for many years, you know, we've had garages, we've had all sorts of little bits all over the place. And at the time, they were worth absolutely nothing at all. They're in more enlightened times that we live in, they suddenly become attractive and usable. So it's yeah. So right.
Anne's got a question.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Anne. Please.
Thank you. I assume what you mean by bits and pieces is sort of little bits of grass on the end of a row or in between houses, those little corners that we see on a lot of the estates. Is that about right?
It varies. I know that some of the garage plots have been, but we have had a piece of land when it's come to disposal be valued at over £100,000. So there's a mix of things in there, but I think we'll end up with a lot of the sort of pieces of land that you're thinking of. But the mix, there are some slightly more valuable items, well, particularly when they're valued for disposal. That's the part of the issue. When we build back, I've got to get values from a valuer. Well, what were they valued before somebody was interested in, and what are they valued now that somebody's expressed an interest? So I need the two sides of that equation to answer fully the question that you asked.
Is that okay, Anne? Yeah. Robin.
Thanks, Chair. Clearly a lot of work has gone into this, and lots of colleagues have asked the questions that I had really around capacity. What I don't have a sense of is how this is calibrating against other local authorities where we're having to build back, and then hypothetically the council ceases to exist because of the reforms that are being railroaded through, brackets undemocratically. What happens if we don't get a clean audit at the time that the council cease to exist?
I think that's a really good question, and it's one that sort of we as auditors haven't been told. You know, you're not by a long shot the only council that's in this position where auditors are trying to build back assurance and they've got multiple years of disclaimed opinions, and sort of getting 3 clean balance sheets, and other councils we've got to build back assurance on I&E, which actually can be harder. So it's a very good question, but one at the moment that we haven't been given kind of an answer to. We've sort of had guidance from government to say you need to get to this position by 27-28. But obviously we aren't going to put ourselves in a position if we can't do it because the information's not there, or, you know, we have to be assured by audit quality and things like that. So it's a good question, but one that I don't really have a definitive answer for you, to be honest.
So we don't really know the true extent potentially of which government reform could in 50 years time save some money. Political point aside, how is this calibrating compared to where other local authorities are?
Sorry, can I just clarify what you mean by sort of calibrating?
Yeah, so you've kind of reached a set of, am I allowed to call them judgments? We've got to a point in a journey that you're going on that is going to take 3 years to potentially get that complete picture. How are we faring on that journey compared to some of the other local authorities? Just so we have a sense of, you know, because we've heard there's a capacity issue. Ashley's, you know, in your opening presentation, really clear, some good things have happened, but we're hearing there's capacity issues. We're hearing that some things are a bit inconclusive at the minute, you know, which may be really normal, or there may be some things we're out on a limb on. So it would just be useful to get a sense of how we're faring compared to others, I think.
I think it's a positive that we've been able to complete your PPE movements build back assurance, and the fact that, you know, yourselves, if you produce your accounts on time every year, we've got councils that haven't produced accounts, so they're in a much worse position, and we're in a much worse position in trying to rebuild assurance and things like that. I think in terms of your ability to do it, we're not, I mean, HRA land aside, which actually it could be material, it probably isn't. We're not finding anything that are big deal breakers when the work that we are doing. So there's nothing that's making me say if capacity is all fine. And I you know, I have to say here, if we're required to do further build back work, which is for multiple years, we might have capacity things as well that we need to deal with. I don't think you're in a bad position compared to other authorities. There might be some authorities who are in a better position, have maybe got more capacity and things like that. But some of our clients have not been able to produce accounts and have gone past backstop dates in terms of producing accounts. So I would say you're kind of in the better position.
That's very good. Well done. Top half of the table.
Ashley, do you wish to contribute?
I think one of the things that was mentioned was like calibrating. I think we have to remember that when we went into this disclaimed position, when AZETs came in as our auditors across the country, I think the opinions that were outstanding and were to be disclaimed were over 500. So it's a national issue that we're dealing with. How quickly they're all catching up with that, I think is variable. But the notion that, you know, that this is just for here or local, this is across the country, that this is happening up and down the country. The audit committees are having these types of conversations. And you mentioned about the LGR. There's a lot of unknowns that's in there. One of the things we do know is that the 27-28 accounts for Hinckley will have to be adopted by an audit committee that's in the unitary. They will be responsible, and not only just for us, but for all of them, because Hinckley's audit committee most likely will be dissolved along with the council, and so external auditors are going to be feeding into a new audit committee body, but they will probably look back at the sort of work that was done right up until the end. So everything that comes through the audit committee will probably be feeding in as part of that assurance. The exact mechanics of how that work are yet to be decided, but that is a legal change, isn't it? The councils will end, the new one will begin, and it will be that audit committee, because the accounts won't be prepared until the new unitary is in place. So they will have to have the responsibility for that.
And actually, I'm 1,000,000% sure that this committee and you and your team will do a really robust job, as will the auditors, and that, you know, part of kind of just trying to understand where we're at. It's just useful to have that big picture, I think. But it's the consequences of it not being right, because if, you know, we're merging with others and bits and pieces are going on, we might be great. But actually what I've heard is there are a chunk of, and I don't know if the other local authorities are around here or not, but there are a chunk who aren't in that position. So I mean, that's going to get awfully interesting, isn't it?
I think interesting is a good phrase, actually. I don't think that when we come to that point, disclaiming them is going to be an option, is it?
I mean, to be honest, that will depend on where we are in terms of rebuilding assurance and what we can get. So it might be an option that's available to us, it might not. But I mean, I think it's important to remember that auditors have always got the option to qualify accounts and disclaim accounts. That's not just new for this situation. So it depends on where we get to be honest, and how well we're, you know, assured over the financial position.
Interesting situation. We all get ready to run at the last moment, do we? Right. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Chris. Do you want to?
May I come back in, Dave?
Yes, of course.
Another
Please.
question. It's linked to what we were just discussing. We've got a community governance review going on at the moment with respect to Hinckley, which is going to have some very significant changes potentially to the vista in terms of how services are delivered. Where do you see this work as regards the budget and the audit of that budget and the audit of the accounts linking across to the community governance review, with a view to setting up a new body with a clean balance sheet, when what they're inheriting has not yet been effectively signed off by through the external audit process?
I'll have a go. I don't believe the current position of our accounts being qualified would have any present any barriers to the creation of a Hinckley Town Council, should that be the outcome of the community governance review, because we're at the second stage consultation at the moment, which is actually generating a lot more interest than the first stage, which is positive. I will need to take further advice on that, but I don't think that in itself prevents the new town council from being established. We are obviously still considering what, if any, services would also transfer to the town council, and obviously any financial implications of doing so. So there's still a lot of work going on in the background, but yeah, I'll look at that further, unless Helen's aware of cases where it's happened before, but I don't believe it to be a barrier.
I think in terms of from an audit point of view, so when we do our value for money, one of the areas that we look at is economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and a lot of that is around service delivery. So if the council is changing what services it provides or how it provides them, we would pick that up as part of that work. And we obviously also look at governance arrangements and how, so we don't provide an opinion on necessarily what exactly has happened, but we provide sort of an overview of what are the arrangements in place. Have you got proper committees set up? Are these being good? So what's the governance around it? And in terms of the services and the finances, you know, if all of a sudden you've got a big drop in your CIES and we're saying, well, why has that changed year on year? As long as we can be explaining it and why, it's because, well, we don't get the funding for that now, the town council has it or whatever. So it's more of a holistic view from us that often gets picked up through our value for money work.
You okay with that, Chris? Yeah, fine. Right, folks. Any further questions for Helen? Or have we done it to death, folks? Lovely. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Helen. Right. Next.
The statement of accounts, I think, is the next thing, and the annual governance statement. I'll just go over the cover report. This isn't the first time you've seen the accounts. You saw the accounts when they were originally.
This is 1B, isn't it?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is 1A. Sorry, agenda 1A. That's what we're looking at the moment. So this covers the statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. This isn't the first time you've seen these financial statements. It's the most up-to-date version with the external audit findings and any amendments that we've made. So I wasn't going to go over the detail of the financial statements, but more just to go over the covering report. The recommendations there. Yeah, you have to note that the financial statements for 24, 25 and the annual governance statements are approved for publication, subject to completion of the final element of the external audit process. What that means, if there's anything between now and when we have to put them on the website that comes to our attention from our external auditors, we would still have to amend the accounts. So even, you know, the day before we put them on, if there was something they suddenly says, oh, we spotted this, you need to make it, we would amend it. And that's why you get the second recommendation, is that the chair of the audit committee is given delegated authority to approve the final 24-25 statements of accounts once the audit has been completed, if there are any further amendments. So what would happen is, if there was an amendment, I would contact the chair. I would talk through that based on any communication from the external auditors, and then I would okay it with the chair. And then at the next audit committee, I would bring a short summary if there were any further changes of note that needed to come to the audit committee. This is fairly typical practice. It's not unusual to delegate authority to the chair, even when opinions are being signed off as normal, and there's no problem. This is very often done because there's always a bit of time between the audit committee and when the partner puts their signature on the statement, and they always reserve the right to make an amendment if needed. So there's nothing unusual about that. It just runs through a bit of the high level of the various statements that are there, the comprehensive income, the movements in the reserves. These were discussed before. This covering report has been come before when the draft was come. That's just a bit of an explain of what the main statements in the accounts are that the opinion is being given on, and then the annual governance statements. As I've said, the annual governance statement this year, the good news was we haven't got the value for money significant weakness, so we don't have to report that in there. The main table is 3.3. You've got a paragraph 3.2 on the table underneath. Just gives some of the changes that were made. And what it's doing is drawing your attention to various notes in the accounts, saying that the notes to the accounts have been amended. Amendment to the primary statements. Remember, the primary statements are the I&E statements, the balance sheet, the cash flow, the movements in reserves. They're the main statements that are at the front of the accounts. There are no amendments on the front of those accounts. These are amendments to the notes or the policy disclosures within the accounts. So that table there is just to draw the members' attention to the notes that have been amended. There is another table, but that was covered by the covering report on the external audit report, which just goes over the significant risks and the audit findings that were there and what that meant, which we've already discussed. It touches on the audit backlog. Again, we've had a discussion about that. And it just, under paragraph 310, it just goes over the audit years, potentially what could happen. You could be disclaimed for 25, 26, 26, 27 and 27, 28, or you could have a disclaimed, a modified, and then hopefully a clean opinion. Obviously, all that work's still to be done, but when we first went into the backlog position, this was the potential that we needed to look at. And as external auditors have said, it's really key to try and get those clean balance sheets so that when by the time we get to the 27, 28 accounts, we have an unmodified opinion, or even a qualified, except for that would allow them to move forward into the unitary, knowing exactly what the opening position is. Hopefully we can get that. I'm sorry, there seems to be an extraneous 26, 27 at the bottom of that table. Yes, yeah. We've talked about the internal control and the annual governance statement. The reason I wanted to bring that attention, we've already said that they haven't identified weaknesses, but also there's the internal audit opinion as well, which is the annual opinion. Now, I put their opinion in the annual governance statement, and it's part of the assurance that you get that there aren't any significant weaknesses. We've had the information come from our external auditors saying they haven't got anything from the VFM point of view, but there's also the report of the internal auditors on the annual report, and they could say that if there was what they thought was such a significant weakness, they felt once something needed to be said, it's the annual report would be the opportunity for them to do that and for us to consider it. They've given an overall monitor assurance. It's probably the internal auditors could probably talk to that report to give you a bit more background on that. But I wasn't going to go over the detail of the financial statements because there's over 100 pages there. You have seen them before. There's been some changes. We know there's a disqualified opinion. The thing that we can take as the good news for this set of accounts, as I've said, is the VFM position. So happy to take any questions. I don't know whether you want to have the internal auditors cover their annual report now or separately, but this is, you need to note the recommendations there, and they need to be formally recorded so that we can move forward from this report. But I haven't to take any questions.
Right, thanks for that, Ashley. I've made an error. When Helen had finished item 8, I should have asked for us to propose and second that report that we've accepted it. Could I do that now so that we've got that cleared? Okay, thanks, Rebecca.
I'll propose.
Thank you. Right.
Probably need to.
How? So,
Do we need to vote on it?
yeah, we need to vote on that. I beg your pardon. Yeah. Now I'm getting ahead of myself again. Members, do you want to do as Ashley has mentioned, or do you want to go straight into the draft internal audit report? What is your preference?
I think we have to go to those recommendations, don't we? Actually, it's presented.
Yeah, I would suggest that you deal with the recommendations in the covering report and then note what the internal auditors say about their annual report, if that's okay.
Right. And I see Paul hovering over his button. Right.
Would you like me to clarify, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, members are being asked to note the report and the financial statement. So it's 2.1 and 2.2 of the covering report, page 1 of the additional pack. So you're being asked to note the report and the financial statements and the AGS to be approved for publication subject to completion of the final element of the external audit process, and that the Chair of Audit Committee is given delegated authority to approve the final statement of accounts once the audit has been completed.
I am happy to propose all of that. I don't know if we need to do it as separate votes or.
Thank you, Julie.
And take a vote as well.
Yes. Sack the chairman, he's deficient.
I'm not proposing that.
You want to sit here, Scott? You're perfectly welcome, my friend. Right. Having got that out of the way. So what are we doing next? We're doing that will be you, Alexander, then I take.
I believe it is me, Chair.
Yeah, greetings, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, even if it is virtually. So there's not a lot that I want to pull out from our annual opinion. I kind of wanted to jump straight to page 4, which is page 148 in the supplemental pack. That page gives our opinion, which, as Ashley has alluded to, is a moderate opinion over the framework of governance, risk management and controls. And to highlight on that page is just also that we have elected to defer our follow-up of recommendations from 24-25 into our plan for 25-26, which is currently ongoing. On the following page, we also then have the recommendations and assurance levels for each of our reports. And on this page and on the next page, we'll also note that our IT audit is still in draft, which is why this report and our annual opinion is still in draft. However, we don't expect the limited assurance that we've given against IT to change, and therefore our opinion shouldn't change at all either once that is finalised. And those are really the points I wanted to pull out on the annual opinion. So I will pause there for questions.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Alexander. Okay, members, is there anything that you wish to ask Alexander on that report? Robin?
Could I just, so IT is one of these things that kind of rattles around as being problematic for all sorts of reasons, you know, stuff to do with cyber, stuff to do with procurement. Do you know, I may have asked this before, do you know when the report will be ready, particularly if the assurance is limited? I understand why it might be limited, and I get that context.
Do you want me to take that, Alexander? It's actually with management for responses at the moment, so it's with us to provide the responses. I'd like to be able to convince them otherwise of the limited assurance. It's a vulnerability management report, but we will see what comes out of that once the responses are formalised.
Fine. I mean, and presumably cyber and everything else is looked at as part of it. So it's, you know, I get the challenges.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Members, anything for Alexander? No? Okay. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the? Yep. All right. Sorry, Chris. Scott, and thank you. Well, that was short and sweet. Thanks very much indeed, Alexander, for hanging about for us and presenting that report. Thank you very much indeed. You can stay with us if you want to, but I'd recommend that you probably take better things to do.
I think that there are a couple more reports, I think,
Is there?
later in the agenda.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah. Yes, I beg your pardon. I've
I
got
think,
them here.
6 and 7.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Have we finished with the supplementary items?
Yes, it's just the internal audit reports, Neil.
Right. So we're back to the agenda. Right. Okay, take out 8. So we're on to 6,
I'll jump back
which
in
is
then,
the
Chair.
surface level budget monitoring internal audit. So that will be back to you then, Alexander. I do beg your pardon.
No worries.
If you'd like to
So-
take us through that, please.
Absolutely. So our report, I believe, begins on page 5 of the main pack. I really just wanted to highlight some of the recommendations that we've raised. So just there are 2 medium recommendations around formal training being provided to budget holders, and also making sure that material budget variances are formally documented. So those are recommendations 1 and 2 respectively. We've also raised a 3rd medium recommendation that's just around reporting of from systems, as we weren't able to perform our planned data analytics. However, following management comments, it's been identified that that was due to human error, not any issues with the systems itself. So that shouldn't be an issue moving forward. Again, there's not much else I wanted to highlight within that report, so I'll pause there for questions again.
Right, thanks, Alexander. Members, any comments, questions? Robin?
What's the plan around training? There's a comment in there that says that, I think if I've read it correctly, it says that there isn't training or people aren't trained on budget management, but I may have misread that.
I think what it's getting at is that there's a lot of people who have got a lot of experience and have been with us for a while, so they have been on training at some time, but there are some that would like some refresher training, and obviously there are people that have joined us. So it's just to make sure that we have an update to that. So finance are putting some training slides together, and we're going to call budget holders or other people who are interested in various bits of the financial process and make sure that everybody's got some training on that. I mean, there's lots of informal, because all budget holders have an accountant that they can talk to who meets them regularly, and so this is more formalising it. So it's not as though budget holders are out there with no one to talk to if they have a question. They've all got appointed accountants that they do talk to, and if they do have any concerns or issues or questions, they do ask them questions. This is just formalising that, so that we can say, there you go, internal audit. Those are the dates that we did some training, and there's a training pack, and that everybody can be happy with. Thanks.
Ilias, why don't you comment on?
Yeah, Ilias. Yeah.
Yeah, can I
Do
just
you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. Can I just add to what Ashley's saying? So when a new person starts, there's a new budget holder created, they do get the training. I think what internal audit have rightly picked up, we need to just formalise the process and document it in such a way that A, we can prove that training, that they've had the training, and B, there's not any gaps in training, so different officers are getting different levels of training. So that's a bit where we need to just do a bit of work on, make sure we're formalising the processes. But in a nutshell, if a new person joins, before they can have access to the ledger, it needs to be signed off by the director, and they do get training before they can actually use the system. But yeah, currently it's not formalised, so we need to just do a bit of work on that. Thank you very much.
Paul?
Yes, when I read the report, I had sort of mixed feelings, because understand entirely what the audit is saying and fully support it. I felt that I didn't personally understand what roles and objectives each budget holder is placed upon them. And my only concern is that we could have some budget holders that have been here a long time that are hell-bent on delivering all of their services at the lowest possible cost, and meeting all of the possible outcomes. And I wouldn't like to see a training package that encourages them to spend up to their budget every year within sort of 2%. So I'd like to understand what the roles and objectives of budget setting is so that I could understand that. But I understand there is a need for that, but I don't really know that I fully understand how many budget holders we've got within council, and I thought that would be useful.
Is anybody bursting to answer that question?
Sorry, Chair, and not necessarily this evening.
I can't answer, Ilias may be able to, about the number of budget holders, but I'd like to reassure members that we certainly don't have a culture of spending up to the budgets in the organisation. Very much the opposite. And I think the training and what we're trying to reinforce is around budget monitoring skills, not so much in terms of how you spend the money, but how you manage that budget effectively, early warning systems around potential overspends, etc., and escalation routes.
You're happy with that, Paul?
Yeah, it would be interesting just to at some stage for audit committee to see some of that, because it's quite an integral part of the whole process. Maybe it's more finance performance, but in the context of an audit report, there's some elements that I don't understand.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Chris.
A comment as much as the as much as a question, really, but it was just a link together in item 5 around inconsistent budget monitoring. There's reference in there to resource constraints affecting both the accountancy service and the team, which again is another reason why we need to make sure that we don't implement a structure that we cannot resource and don't have the capacity for.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I think the resource issue is something that definitely needs to be addressed. And I'd feel a lot happier if we got some feedback on that at some point. But members, is there any further questions that you want to ask on this report? Can we propose okay, and a vote, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to item 7, which is again you, Alexander, the internal audit progress report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our internal audit progress report, hopefully beginning on page 23 of the packs, is what I have noted. Really just wanted to highlight and explain our RAG status for delivery. You can see on page 3 of our report that is stated as behind. There have been some issues in delivery, but I just wanted to reassure members of this committee that Sarah is having a meeting with Ashley and Julie tomorrow, and part of that meeting will be to discuss moving forward how to rectify those issues and make sure that we deliver our plan in line with the reporting cycles for 25-26.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Alexander. Any questions, members? Any comments? No. Can I have a proposal second? Yeah. Show of hands. Thank you very much. Well, that does complete your piece then, Alexander. So thank you very much indeed. And I wish you a good night.
Thank you very much, Chair, and hopefully Sarah will be with you next time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we've dealt with item 8. Next is item 9, which is the audit committee forward plan. There's nothing on that I have any comments on at the moment, with the exception that at some point I will be speaking to all of you on one of our private meetings about any additions or alterations that we want to make to that, but I will be getting in contact with you on that score. But at the moment, I feel that the forward plan represents what we should be doing at this precise moment in time. Are members happy with that? Chris?
Chair, could I just make a comment as chair of scrutiny, and it may link into Miriam's role as well. We're doing some work in terms of action planning, implementing the best practice guidance, which the government has issued regarding scrutiny. And one of the actions in there is about ensuring that audit and scrutiny are aligned. Let's call it that. So it was just really to put a flag up in terms of the forward plan to say that there may be an item that we would want to propose to bring to this committee just to formalise that arrangement, but it's still at its early stages. So it's really just almost one to go on the bottom of the action plan of the forward plan to say to be allocated to a meeting at an appropriate time. Okay.
Yeah, Paul has actually mentioned that to me earlier on. And I should be at scrutiny tomorrow night anyway, so we can probably have a discussion about that over a cup of coffee or something. But if everybody's happy with that forward plan as it exists at this precise moment. Oh, sorry, Ashley.
Just one thing. If we discussed, I think, at the update to the action plan that for the next meeting, try to capture if there's any training needs. And I think the comment that Councillor Lambert made about scrutiny and audit, how they link, might be something to consider under that heading. What if there is a particular train, but it's also, I don't know how members at the moment are going to collate that, or if you need maybe me to set up a meeting. Do you want to discuss that, or do you want to do it informally through the chair? You might just want to confirm that as part of the forward programme, because it's only at the beginning of April that we're hopefully going to get the first idea of what your training needs are. So it was just to bring that to your attention. Thanks.
Thinking about it, we had a look at the self-assessment last week, and we've got some notes that came from that. Perhaps we could use that and combine the two, and then have a meeting to further that and see how we've fit the thing together. Does that sound okay with you, Chris? Yep. If members are happy with that, then Ashley and I will look at that, and we'll be in touch and set that up. Do we have to?
Not the forward plan, no, just to note, that's
okay.
fine, yeah.
Okay, so item 10, items to be referred to council. There is nothing at this time to refer to council. The only thing I would say is that I am asking for the minutes of our meetings to go to council, such as scrutiny does as well, because I think it's about time that we did that. So I should be getting in touch with Rebecca and probably Julie to see how we can get that fixed up. The report to council, that's in work at the moment, but I will be explaining that to you at some point. I'll be in touch with you probably by email on that. Item 11, I don't have any other items of business. So with that in mind, I think we just about wrap this on up tonight. So thank you very much for attending. Safe journey home. Safe journey home, Helen. Thank you for Chris, Ilias, and everybody, and Alexander, of course, for joining us. And we shall see you